Welcome back, Hornets. Hope you're doing good. Cheers. In this video, I want to talk about corruption or ego or that thing that is being structured out of inability to handle entropy, chaos, if you will, eros. Um, we talked in the previous video how only logos can handle eros, and when the logics invade that space out of weakness of logos or absence of logos, it creates the structure um, of ego, which then needs to be maintained and feed on innocence and confidence of the souls. And so that's the matrix, right? We talked about this. And in this video, I want to talk about how it relates to your everyday life and what is the approach to handle that. Because the whole point of it, especially if you're a man, is this: it's the reduction of not entropy, but what I would call catentropy. Now, um, the process of alchemy can be sort of the process of alchemy is something of nature of destroying the ego or that structure that we talked about, that disorderly structure that was created with invasion of logics within the space of logos, right? That's just the one way of saying it, how one may turn evil and create that false light, okay? False light being uh, pleasure. It runs on pleasure. That ego that anybody creates, it needs pleasure to survive. Pleasure of whatever that may be. It can, like I said before, it can be from minor to extreme, and so that's the degree of evil that somebody is. Okay. Now, I have zero tolerance to any of that. I don't have zero tolerance in myself. I know, exactly how many times within the last year I've failed because I smoked too much and I lost the control. But I know exactly when it happened and how it happened and how not to have this again. I have zero tolerance of this type of motion within myself at this point. Um, Now, to bring it down to earth, so to speak, and apply it to everyday life, is like this. Now, as I said before, this type of energy feeds on innocence and confidence, which is a soul energy. Soul is pure soul is completely vulnerable, unprotected, and it's like your people call it like the, you know, inner child sometimes, but that's your soul. It's this playful and creative part of you that is always there, you know. Okay. Now, and then there is what's going to protect that. So, and then in one, there's a benevolent father, and that you can call it a Christ energy. And then another side is a tyrannical father. We talked about this before, which is uh, an abusive type of structure that is masculine. Okay, there's this tyrannical father and benevolent father um, archetype. And the only antidote to the tyrannical father is benevolent father. uh, because of the falsehood of the light, the tyrannical father or antichrist is destroyed immediately coming in touch with somebody who is carrying the light energy, the Christ energy, the real light. And let me explain you how it works. It works like this. Um, a person on a surface level may seem innocent and playful and, sort of seemingly unprotected. And somebody who's carrying this demonic energy would approach and say like, oh, that's just like, the gold mine. I can just, you know, steal this from this person because look, this person is innocent, is trusting, right? But that's how it looks like on the surface. Then the person attempts to do this. Say, well, I can get away with it. That's, of course, this demonic energy. But what happens is that uh, when somebody does that to somebody who is an alchemist, they fuck themselves over for the rest of their life. They curse themselves, and they're put in this type of accelerated karmic process where their the pleasure they would get off. Because by the way, thief or liar, they don't do this for that much of a material gain. They do this to pacify that hunger, that ego in their heart. That's what they do this. You have to understand. Okay, they do it for pleasure. And this is why there's this predatory behavior with the innocence, which is completely, of course, unacceptable. But and this is no longer, this is no longer. Uh, this no longer goes. This no longer is going to happen, because there's this tightening and choking and cutting off the energy supply to these predatory energies within people. Doing the same thing does not get them pleasure anymore. This is what happens when they fuck with somebody who appears to be innocent, but can handle that energy and alchemize everything. The way I experience everything, in anybody who's interacting with me, I feel their energy immediately. And if anybody is approaching with this demonic energy with me and trying to fuck with me, I feel it energetically. I don't feel fear anymore, and I don't feel aggression anymore. What I feel immediately what is at the source of it, and that is burning pain. This is what I feel when somebody comes into my presence with some bullshit. I know what to do with that. There's nothing inside of me anymore that can burn. This is why that burning, that pain to me is no longer uncomfortable. I dig it. Okay? So what happens is like that moth flying into the flame and burning itself up. To tell you a little bit more, the dark side of this process, like, because the alchemical process is weaving this structure of consciousness. There's a real soul, and it's masculine and feminine, like sometimes I call diamond, and sometimes I call pearl. That real structure of consciousness that we're here to create. And the other side of it is facilitating the growth of ego through keep on pacifying it with pleasure and doing things that are pleasurable to the ego. You grow that dark crystal. And so this is how you actually keep the power. This is why anybody, if you want to know who is the darkest, just point to the person who is uh, attracted to the position of most power and control. For some fucking reason, most of them are Jews. And speaking of this, I have to say something. Now, Jews became sort of like a derogatory term, and maybe rightfully so, because it is not about the ethnicity; it's about the corruption. It doesn't matter what you are, where you're from, what is your color. Corruption is in everybody and needs to be dealt with at that level. So, if you want to discriminate somebody who's a corrupt soul, you can call that person a Jew. But there's actual origin of the whole story and everything, and there's a Hebrew language, for example, and the Hebrew people. I would remain the meaning of the actual real Hebrew person is who adheres and lives through the world of a chemical way, through the heart, that right way of life. Okay? And that's what I would call a Hebrew, to distinguish somebody who's a corrupt soul, which is becoming right now, it's like a derogatory term, a Jew. It's just not really a matter of opinion, it's just what's going on, and there's a lot of contra movement that's happening against this thing. I mean, it's obvious if you just watch anything that can be expressed and unfiltered. There is a very, very clear distaste for the people in power, playing these all sorts of sacrificial games and power brokerage and stuff like that. And what they do really, if you look at it, they consume souls. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. You want to make it in Hollywood, sell your soul. Get fucked in the ass by some satanic asshole. It's all about taking your soul. They eat souls. And that's how ego grows. Ego grows when they can eat the soul. Okay? But what happens when somebody like this is trying to eat the soul that is alchemical, or, the soul of an alchemist? What happens is that they get eaten. I can honestly tell you, everything that's been happening to me lately, and the reason why I came here in the Mexico Caribbean, and everything about this led to realization of what the fuck am I doing here, and what the fuck am I? I eat egos. I eat these dark crystals, and I crush them, and I use it as a fertilizer for something cool and awesome. And I'm somebody who's not in a war against all of this, because that's another wrong way of dealing with. Because if you in some sort of war against all of this, then you have not alchemized your anger fully. And that's what happened to Hitler. Originally, when he came up, he was talking, and he was resonating with a lot of people's souls, because he was telling the truth and said, yes, indeed, there is a such thing as a corruption of the state. There is such thing that, those dark intents and these powers that be, right? He was right about that. But the way he went about it, he became the same evil he was fighting. And so, no, that's not the way. But he was right about the problem. He recognized that there is this darkness, there's this cancer in the world, and he was willing to fight it. He made it more about ethnicity rather than the corruption itself. I'm not stupid, I'm not anti any ethnicity. I'm anti-corruption. I don't know why most of these people turned out to be Jews. That's just for some other philosopher to figure out of why that happened. But I don't give a shit what they are. I just see if you carry the corruption in your soul, my life mission is to gradually be in a process of reduction of that. This is also very important what I'm saying here. It's not about eliminating everything, because if you try to do that, and I really like what Elon Musk said on Joe Rogan, and he said, if you embark on a mission on eliminating all the fraud, all the corruption, all that stuff, you are entering in this type of backlash energy, and so then you're entering in this type of war. And it's not right to do this, because energetically speaking, you're going to have like a lot of resistance, and you won't be successful. What makes you successful is just like that frog does not know that it's being boiled when it's a gradual and progressive improvement, and in this case, reduction of corruption. Another word for this corruption would be catentropy. It's not an entropy, so that's why sometimes people don't, when they have not explored consciousness sufficiently, they don't know that it's not about reduction of entropy. It is destruction of catentropy, which is the ego. Anybody who's growing ego rather than the soul is in a process of catachemy. It's a catachemical process. They're reverse alchemists. Okay, these are the people who are doing these satanic rituals and get off on the pleasure of dominance and breaking sacredness and stuff like that, right? Like breaking humanity, everything. They're the most evil people. And so they are basically these black crystal holders. Okay? And that gives you power. It's limited, but it does give you manifestational power. You get the things that you want to have. This is why they are in power. But I have to also say this is not the real power, because the only power that brings you is the power of the matrix. It's not an ultimate power. It's not the power of the consciousness itself. It's not the power of over the reality. It's only like that little matrix. And as long as the soul submits itself to the matrix, then they will have the power over that soul. But okay. So, if you're in the process of gradual reduction of corruption within yourself, which is a chemical process, this is what's going to happen. Every time you go hang out with people, look, like I have no sort of like a filter or a block when I go out and I hang out with people. It comes everything to me. It's not my choice. Sometimes people say, well, it's not your pain, it's not your feeling, it's somebody else's. And my rule of thumb, if I'm feeling it, then it is mine. And another thing that I've witnessed and I realized, there is only one ego. There's no such thing as my ego or your ego. There's only one ego. And so this is why I'm no longer looking at this as me versus them, because that is not allowing me to have a right process of alchemy. It's blocking it. So I just go all the way into this pain, and it's no longer painful. I just go all into it, this dullness and numbness, and it's no longer dull and numb. It's nonsense to me. I used to do this. We're thinking like, well, that's not mine, and then that does not work, because every time I say, Lord, that's not mine, I'm creating some sort of a belief or protection of trying to push that thing away from me, and that just keeps coming back even more. So I stop doing that, and I say everything is mine. If I'm feeling in my heart, it is mine to deal with. Okay? And I don't avoid hanging out with people. And I got to the point right now where there's no that attack, that you can call it attack, that, or that exposure to this demonic entities that I cannot handle. It's you know just the way it works. And that happens on a soul level, on the mind level, and the body level. All those three levels needs that type of protection. Okay. Okay, and it's not, yes, you can call it a spiritual war, but it's not the physical war, right? Because war does not change anything. Okay, what changes is why everything is going on in the first place, and that is this alchemical process. And this is why, like, if you're listening to this, and I would encourage you, especially if you're a man, uh, never subscribe to this idea that, like, oh, they are in power and poor little me. It's like, as soon as you do that, you give away your power, because you can say no to this, and you say, all right. I said, well, they're probably gonna get away with this again. Why would you say that? Why don't you say no? They won't get away with this, at least within yourself. Yes, that will cause all sorts of processes happening with you. Then you're gonna have to face that, but that's part of the deal. Every time you're saying no within yourself to something, you don't agree with this, you don't consent with this. And so you don't even have to go there and protest or do any of this kind of stuff. You just energetically never submit to the authority of the ego. And every little bit of it coming in your way, you put it on fire. And when you take away the ego from that type of soul, you can see that there's nobody there, or it's just like a drooling child. That's what's there. There was never a tiger. It was all just an illusion. So you have to understand that they are not real. They do not carry the real power if you do not give it to them. And you think, what's the difference between saying, no, it's not gonna, they're not gonna get away. They are going to be jailed. They are going to have consequences. This is what's going to happen. And you say that, and your statement will, at least within yourself, evoke all sorts of processes that then you have to defend that. You understand? You make a thesis, and then antithesis arise, and then there's synthesis. And then you literally, actually enter this timeline where they do have the consequences, and they do have, karmic law in action, because ego is a way of avoiding the karmic law. As long as you're doing the evil shit and you keep on producing that pleasure, it gives you that light, that false light, that temporal ecstasy, if you will, not infinite ecstasy. And so then that keeps you away from the law of the karma. But once you come along and you alchemize all that, and you don't give in yourself, you don't give in to pleasure within your life, every time you do this, you impact the entire reality. Okay? You do. But it's not a thought level wishful thinking. This is real energetic changes that you're going through that sometimes can be excruciating. This is how you know it's real. But like I said, with the right attention and awareness, and knowing how to meet those and how to process those, it is actually an enjoyable process. I got to the point where, like, I always find it. You see what I'm trying to say? Like, even if some pain, it just bothers me for like hours even, I don't give up on finding that space, that 0 point where it is not seen by me like this anymore. I always find it. I always unlock that key. And you should too. And every time you do this, what do you know? The people who betray the soul have consequences. Because anybody who betrays me betrays their soul. And because I'm alchemizing those energies, they get karma. Meaning it's not some sort of like, at this point it's like nobody gives a crap whether you believe in karma or not. It's not about the belief anymore. It's basically a metaphysical law that is being imposed. And so in a way, if I'm anything here, I'm like, like that. We're all sometimes like some sort of cells in an organism, right? And we all play a certain type of function. If I was to be a cell, one of those cells, I would probably be like an immunity cell that attracts the cancer cells and then eats them. Because they think that that's food, and then you see. So another way, I'm gaslighting demons. That's what I'm doing, and it's essentially what the alchemist or exorcist or whatever you want to call it. And by the way, the name Jesus actually refers to this process. And of course, there's like an historical figure, but I wish they had a different name, because what Bible was trying to communicate is a process of consciousness. And this is why, like, Jesus is a faculty of consciousness. Whenever you face all those negative things that you think are negative, and when you put complete and total attention on it, they're no longer negative, and you have transmuted them. You don't. It's like this process of not letting a single logic to enter that world. It's divisiveness, because logic always divides, right? It's that critical factor. When the critical factor does not say anything about it, not naming this as like this is pain, or whatever. When that stops, there's this and realization that it's not pain at all. That is bliss. It's not numbness or dullness at all. It's peace, right? And once you break through like that, your reality changes immediately. This is real. This is not, again, just like children game. Okay? And this is why all these people who do not go through this process and mess around and still feed on people's energy, and at this point I'm not going to name names, but at some point in the future I probably will. I'm probably going to name everybody, because I mean, this is happening already, and you see these the real faces of these fake ass gurus is coming up, because all of this thing about the Epstein files, the Epstein was the basically the almost like an incarnation of the devil, or of that, or at least a devil's foot soldier, where he was in a corruption of souls. Like, he wanted to have all these powerful people to sell their souls to him, and it was almost like temptation, an appeal to the dark side of these people. Oh, you want to get fucking freaky, you want to do this shit, and then of course that's what the Satan and the devil would say. They say, yeah, I can give you everything you ever want, but you got to do this. You got to break the taboo. You got to liberate yourself, right? And that type of false liberation, this Babylonian, liberation. And so people sell their souls, and to me, all of these people who were like supposed to be in power, and perhaps they didn't start with this intent, man, but they just, because they just wanted success, but they give in to these temptations and it went dark. And so you have to be very careful. And some people didn't. And then these people also have monetary influence and monetary power, but they still have a soul, which is great and awesome. And we need more of these types of people who have power, but also have a soul. And they have not sold their soul. Okay? Again, you cannot push this process if you don't want to have a backlash. It is a gradual reduction of corruption. It is not an attempt to completely eliminate all at once. It's a gradual reduction of corruption, and this is what you would also see in the process of alchemical, in the process of alchemy, because your mind may say, "Well, get rid of all of this, right?" No, then you got a backlash. You can enter the kingdom of God by storm. You have to find that softness, and it's just like you got to find the trajectory when you're entering something. If you enter the atmosphere of Earth just directly like that, just there is an explosion, right? And so you don't want that, because what does that look like in the real world? An assassination of somebody who was outspoken about this way too aggressively, because that person himself have not alchemized that, right? And and embarked in expression and of truth, and standing behind the truth, which is the reduction of corruption, without doing that process within themselves first. Because alchemy won't let you. This is another Icarus example. You got to be in between. And when you find that in betweenness, then you can handle any kind of negative feeling within yourself in elegant way. Okay? And even if it's super, super, super intense, you can have that little, like, what I call like a velvet power, where no matter how intense it is, there's this velvet feeling around it that surrounds it. And if I were to equate that to something outside of me in the physical world, that would be like a nuclear reactor. That's another thing. Men, sometimes they pride themselves of being tough. If you're tough, you can't be broken. I don't consider this. Toughness is ego. It's not real toughness. Mike Tyson said that, they all think that they're fucking tough when they come in the ring with me. Because when he fucking unleashes the fire, all of this, you can be titanium and it's still going to be melted. Okay? And the reason you cannot fuck with anybody who broke through that pain, when to them is bliss, you cannot fuck with somebody like that. Because you threaten that person with pain? You can't. You can't threaten that person with pain. And then your only mechanism of intimidating other people collapses, and then the real you comes out, which is just a shitless scared child. And that's what's really going on in these people who are powerful. So which means it's not a matter thing. It's not about the toughness thing. The strongest material on this planet cannot sustain the nuclear fusion process. Cannot sustain that fire. What can sustain that fire? Only the electromagnetic field. And it's not matter. That's what is the strongest thing. Reciprocating electromagnetic field is the strongest thing on the planet, because it's based on the infinity principle, and that's what can sustain that type of. So it's magnetism, right? It's like, what you're gonna do when there's a magnetic force, for example, trying to crush you. What you're gonna do? Fight with it with your steel sword? Even if you move against the magnetic field, it just comes back again. You cannot hurt them. There's nothing to destroy there. There's no toughness there. But if you need any kind of word for it, it is I don't know. Like I don't know. There's a word in English language. Resilience doesn't cut it. Okay. Perhaps it's resilience, but it's a thing. So that's my metaphor, but it's not too far from the real thing. That the real strength and power is not based on the ego. It's not about toughness. Because if you're tough, you can't be broken. But if it's just nothing there anymore, just an energy field, then you can't. There's no one to be hurt. There's no one to be broken. It's this nuclear fusion process that's taking place and burns everything that comes in its way. And so you want to sometimes people go, hey, you have to become a monster and it's like I've killed a nice guy, and it's like, oh no, this is all wrong. You don't do it. This is not the way of the alchemist. This is not the way of a man. You want to become this soul that eats egos. That's what you want to become. That's the most masculine thing. It keeps systematically, little by little, choking the life out of egos. Pressuring, little by little, because all egos are cowards. And you get to this critical point, and even the most stubborn egos are gonna break 100%. No ego can withstand this type of magnetic squeeze. Okay? And only then you can even talk about the benevolent fatherly energy. When you have that bliss energy, that is the benevolent father energy. Because that bliss energy, like you can walk anybody in front of anybody or anybody, everything burns up in that motherfucker. Everything burns up. And those who do not want to burn up, they flee from you. To be burned up later. Because nobody can escape this. Okay? Yes, I'm obviously, as you can tell, sometimes I'm goofy and super soft, and I'm not gonna, lie. I'm a deep down in my heart, I'm a kitten and a softie. But if you try to fuck with that part of me, oh my god, like I don't want anybody to do that, because the hell that they're gonna go through is excruciating. And I'm just laying everything on the table. This is just from just through the fact of being an alchemist, creates so many consequences to people who are trying to betray you or mess with you. Emotional consequences that they cannot handle. You understand? Somebody think that they're gonna get away with it. They never can. And I don't have to do this. I don't have to discipline them in this. Like, of course, like I'm protecting my material wealth, I'm protecting my intellectual wealth, and I'm protecting my spiritual wealth. But I'm not doing this by playing a whack-a-mole game and but I'm just doing this by the creating structures. Anybody, for example, anybody comes to my place, I open my heart to them completely. You say like, well, but they can hurt you. No, they can't hurt me anymore, because pain to me is bliss. And so the only thing they can do is they burn themselves up if they have malicious intent. And if they fight that thing, the karma comes very quickly. And I really don't want people to do this. And there's some people who did this to me, who maliciously betrayed me, stole from me, and all this. And I still told them, I said, come back and let's talk. We can work this out. They couldn't do this, and they chose not to do this, after the most, like really bad stuff. Because there's somebody can betray you spiritually, betray you mentally, and betray you physically. There are three types of, because we are living in three domains, and so the ego is always trying to rob you, always try to lie you. If you find a little tiny lie in a person, if you pull that string, you're gonna find the whole fucking thing. This is the thing about the egos, and you have to be don't create the conditions where the ego can thrive, and that's your mental boundaries. That's your principles. You got to be principled like that. And if you're principled in your mind, then you're going to be creating structures in your material way as well, and making sure the laws that are protecting the state of harmony and not protecting the corruption, within your culture becomes this, and have zero tolerance for bullshit and nonsense, energetically as well. Anybody who's trying to hide their ego cannot. So that's what it means to be a man. As you can see, there's nothing to do with what people are saying over there. It's not about like one technique to learn or whatever. Yes, you need to be principled, and sometimes when you're principled, it does create a lot of alchemical processes, and then that's what I call frame control. If you control your frame well, and you say, okay, no, that's not okay. If it creates kind of process, you burn it all up, but you still stand by that principle. And I'm going to make a little short video about after this one about the attention and respect as this reciprocal energy between a man and a woman, as this primordial energy of power or confidence, and then compassion or innocence, or passion and confidence, and compassion and innocence. Those are two sides of male and female interactions, and I'm going to explain exactly what's going on within that dynamic, to explain all these types of behaviors that and normalization of Babylonian way of life, and all that. Instagram is becoming like okay to show your body to get an attention, offering nothing back in return, no respect. Anyway, I'm going to talk about this in the next video, but this video is about a progressive systemic reduction of corruption in your soul, mind, and body. And you have to be continuously doing that, and if you're in the process, you're safe. You understand? If you don't push it, you're safe. So, and like I said, I don't want people to do this, because if I have my heart open, if people jump in and try to mess with me, I don't want them to do this, because I know that I will alchemize everything, and then they will crash and burn, and then they will want to die of how painful it's gonna get, because they cannot handle this fire. If they can handle this fire, then they would burn up all their ego and become an alchemist, and then you're my brother, like, yeah, awesome, then I don't have to worry about you. But if you're not an alchemist, then that pain, you won't be able to take it. You just won't be able to take it, okay? And it's so surrender your ego, and you won't need to suffer. Trust that, like, if you stop lying, and if you're stop being clever, stop trying to betray your own soul, Because if you betray your own soul, you betray other people's soul. Stop being so slick and conniving and clever and all this nonsense. Like somebody posted in the comments, an absolute nonsense. They thought that I'm gonna fall for this shit. I know exactly what's gonna. I felt the energy that they came at me, and I set the boundary. And so, it's a bad idea to fuck with me. And I'm not saying this as a sort of a threat, because it's not gonna change me. Like I'm not gonna close my heart and stop being, still trusting, because that's my power. This is what I've discovered. Like I'm still gonna trust the person, and that allows this some sort of like attempt to steal something to happen, and this what allows me to trap that demon and burn it forever. It's not a fault, it's a feature. Yes, because I know I am delicious, so you just have to control yourself a little bit. And approach me with honesty and clean heart, and everything's gonna be all right. But again, I'm admitting that I do not recognize the free will of ego. I do not recognize that as a free will of ego. I'm here to say that there's no such thing as a free will of ego. All motion of ego must be blocked and prevented from going in that way, because this simulation allowed you to find a way and alchemize it yourself instead of growing your ego. And for some time you could have gotten away with this and went a dark way. This time it's not working because of this process that I'm explaining to you. Because all this little fire that they were playing with, they're taken away. Like that fire is being taken away by the alchemists. And therefore, what is the real world result? It's not working. The same thing that they do, or the sacrificial rituals or any kind of to pacify the ego, it's just not working. They end up feeling worse and worse and worse because of this. And so that's why there's like the chicken come home to roost. And right now, the situation in the world is different. Ego has no free will. Before it was just like, yeah, that person is definitely like functioning on the belief system, and they just still have ego, and they have not found a way, but they're lying to themselves and to people. They're functioning from the ego, but it's okay, everything is permitted. No, not on my domain and not on my watch. That is not permitted, and time is up for that. That is absolutely not permitted. You understand? Evil is not permitted. Maybe it was, but not under my watch. So I don't take this stand. I do not allow this. If anybody functions on this way, I'm going to say, okay, you're full of shit. I can feel your energy. You're full of shit. I know what you're trying to do. Fuck you. I'm going to denounce you immediately until you okay, all right, this is what it does. Okay, and so anyway, like it all starts with you. If you And it doesn't happen for free. You got to pay your dues. If I make my call and I say, no, this is the reality, this is what's going to be, I'm paying my dues to the alchemy, right? Nothing comes for free in this temporal world. And if I say like, oh no, this is this is going to happen because it's just like a wishful thinking, and I've not paid my dues, it means nothing. It absolutely means nothing. It's like a belief level. And so there's another way of saying it: not betraying your own soul. Start with that. If you don't betray your own soul, you will be surprised what kind of effect you have on the world. Okay? And I'll see you in the next video, where I'm going to talk about relationship dynamics between men and women. And again, I'm going to talk about a holistic and a harmonious and a correct way of interacting with each other, and blocking and preventing the ego attempts to have like this unfair energy, draining type of effect on you as a man or a woman. Okay? The corruption is the problem. It's not the man, it's not the woman. And sometimes men rushing too quickly and saying like, well, women are like that. No, you're talking about the ego. You're talking about the woman's or the feminine ego. That's what you're talking about, okay? Because women may also have a soul, and they do. And so you have to be careful when you say a woman. If you want to be more precise in the woman, saying woman's ego, okay, that's fair enough. But don't, throw the baby out with the bathwater. You don't want to do that. And same thing with women. When they rush in too fast and say like, well, men all like that, because that very process, that type of looking at the woman or at the man with still like a hatred and mistrust, and sort of trying to handle situation through just control, right? Because there's no actual trust there, so there's no love, there's no truth, there's no love. And so then you try to then imitate the harmonious relationship by controlling each other, and then there's no way out, right? And this is what I've seen a lot of people still playing this game, and they're listening to some men who are teaching them and saying like, oh, this is what you got to do, this is what you got to do, you shouldn't do this, you should do this, and then men do that, but they still have not processed this hurt inside of them. And so then they look at women as an enemy to be handled with and to get something out of them, and then the woman look exactly the same thing. So it's just like it's become this battlefield of sexes, rather than coming together harmoniously in unison with joint attempt to deal with the corruption and the ego itself. When two couples realize that okay, you're not my enemy and I'm not your enemy, but there is an enemy that we can deal with together, and that's ego. It's not your ego, it's not my ego, it's just ego. Ego has this feminine side and the masculine side, and sometimes the feminine ego comes through the woman, and the masculine ego comes through the man, but not necessarily. Okay? But when the two souls come together and say, all right, I see we have a common enemy, and you join forces, then you have something cooking. Okay? Then every time the problem arises, there's an awareness of how to deal with that on all three levels, on the soul, mind, and body. And there's a recognition of knowing that, like, well, if we go the ego way, what's going to happen is we're going to lose love and truth. And why is it bad? Because it feels too good to be sacrificed for the momentary jolt of pleasure. Okay? And so when there's this understanding on both sides, neither of you going to have to, and there's also understanding if there's like a slipping going on, and somebody slips in, you pull them out of this. I say, oh fuck yeah, I was in there, thanks for pulling me out. You pull them out of this. And then when they slip in, you pull them out of this. There has to be that responsibility there as well. And so you can't pull them out of this, by um, by seeing them as an enemy. And sometimes some nasty ass shit can come through them, and you have to understand that, like, okay, well, that's not them. That is definitely not them, because they would never speak with me like that. And if you have that view and you don't take it personally and you process everything, then there is clarity there, and the person almost 100% of the time, well, I shouldn't say 100%, but there's a bit of a test. If the person is siding with their soul, they will come up and apologize for every little thing that they did out of their ego, and recognize that, okay, that's the enemy within. That's what we're dealing with, and let's deal with this together. I've almost made a video, within this video, but anyway, you get the point. But I'm gonna make another one. Okay, so there's this consistent, progressive reduction of corruption. And the corruption is not entropy. Of course, when you destroy the corruption, it goes into the entropy and goes into the chaos, eros. And then only logos can rearrange it there. And that's what the benevolent Father is. This is what Jesus called Father. It was talking about this light, bliss, energy, the divine spark that everything stems from, the masculine, like universal masculine principle. That's the Father, because everything stems from. But that Father doesn't really have anything but the vibration, or capacity to create any type of vibration. But it's not. It vibrates. It doesn't speak, if you will. It is in that sense kind of silence, but we can give it voice. If that vibration would speak, what would it say, kind of thing. I know. And it's some sort of poetry would come out. Anyway, guys, I don't want to digress too much. Hopefully it makes sense. Keep up the good fight. We're winning by a landslide, as they say, 100%. And things are not going to be the same the way it was before. You also have to understand. If you've seen in the past that, like, that's what's been going on, oh shit, it looks so good, then you assume they're like, oh, it's going to be the same. No, it's not going to be the same. Because we're breaking cycles. We're changing these things. And we know how to do this. Okay? And it's basically souls getting together and handling the ego. That's what's going on. Okay? Not that, like, no one's gonna look. Before, I didn't understand, like, why people would come up to me, for example, sometimes a woman that I don't know in dancing. Sometimes it happened to me once, actually. And a woman just, like, was venting at me, and she was talking to me and calling me names and complaining about it. And of course, she doesn't really know me, so whatever she was saying is about somebody else, not me. And it happened to me and then before, I wouldn't understand, like, what the fuck is happening? I said, you're not talking about me. That's because you're projecting something, or you are reflecting something that did not come from me, but you're giving it to me. And at first I thought like, well, that's kind of messed up because that doesn't belong to me. That has to be going to the guy who actually did this. But now I don't see it this way. If you bring me manure, I'm gonna grow some flowers, and that's the way I see it. And because I see it that way, she calmed down, and I later invited her dancing, and she apologized, and everything was fine. Right? But if I would just like, hey, this is not me, this is not mine, and then the more you resist in this type of way, you the more it persists. You gotta just let it. Right? All right, guys. Peace. See you in the next one.